Get comfortable. Tonight we are going to walk through a Victorian house, but not the way a visitor would have walked through it. We are going to go through the doors that visitors never opened, up the stairs they never climbed, into the rooms that the family kept out of sight, and down, at the last, into the hidden world beneath the house, where the whole thing was secretly run. We are going to find the rooms that the house was designed to conceal. You have probably pictured a Victorian house, if you have pictured one at all, as a place of grand front rooms. The drawing room with its heavy curtains and its crowded mantelpiece, the dining room with its long table, the handsome hall with its staircase sweeping up. And those rooms were real, and we will see them, but they were only the face of the house, the part that was meant to be seen. Behind that face, and above it and below it, lay a whole other house, a warren of private rooms and secret passages and concealed staircases and hidden working spaces, and this hidden house was, in many ways, the real one. It was where the family lived when no one was watching, where the servants moved unseen, where the true and secret life of the household went on, out of sight of the world. Before we go any further, if you enjoy this kind of history, the close and quiet and richly detailed kind, take a moment to subscribe and to leave a like. It helps this small channel more than you would think. And if you would like to, leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what the hour is where you are. I always like to know who is out there in the quiet. Now let the room around you grow still, and let us go back. It is the 1880s. The place is England, a large and comfortable house in a prosperous part of a town, or perhaps standing in its own grounds a little way outside, the home of a wealthy family, the kind of family that has done very well and built or bought itself a house to match. It is a substantial house of 3 or 4 floors above the ground and a whole world below it, with many rooms and a staff of servants to run them, and it is built, as such houses were built, on a principle that governed everything about it, the principle of separation, the strict keeping apart of the different lives that the house contained. For this is the secret of the Victorian house, the thing to understand before we open a single door. The house was a machine for keeping people apart. It kept the family apart from the servants. It kept the men apart from the women. It kept the children apart from the adults. It kept the public rooms apart from the private ones, and the clean apart from the dirty, and the seen apart from the unseen. Every one of its many rooms had its place in this great scheme of separation, and the hidden rooms, the ones we have come to find, were hidden precisely because the whole design of the house was built to hide them, to keep certain lives and certain labors and certain private truths out of sight. Let us go in and find them, one by one. Here is the thing to understand before we begin our walk through the house, the idea that explains every wall and every door and every hidden stair we are about to find. And it is this: the Victorian house was not designed for comfort, or not for comfort alone. It was designed for propriety, for the maintenance of a whole elaborate code of who should be where, and who should see whom, and what should be shown and what concealed. And the rooms we think of as hidden were not hidden by accident or by some later closing off. They were built to be hidden. The concealment was the design. Consider what the house was hiding, and from whom. It was hiding the servants above all, the small army of people whose labor ran the entire household, who were meant to do their work and move through the house and yet remain, as far as possible, invisible to the family they served. It was hiding the work itself, the cooking and the cleaning and the carrying and the washing, all the hot and dirty and endless labor that kept the family in comfort, meant to happen out of sight and out of smell of the rooms where the family lived. It was hiding the private life of the family, the bedrooms and the boudoirs and the nurseries, the intimate spaces that no visitor was ever meant to see, and it was hiding, in its very arrangement, the truths that the family did not wish shown, the real hierarchy and the real labor and the real private life beneath the polished public face. So when we speak of the hidden rooms of the Victorian house, we do not mean only the secret cupboards and the concealed staircases, though there were those too, and we will find them. We mean the whole hidden half of the house, the entire concealed world that the design kept out of the visitor's sight, the servant's world and the private world and the working world, all of it built into the house's very bones, all of it arranged to be there and yet unseen. The house had a public face and a hidden body, and tonight we are going to explore the hidden body, room by room, from the private chambers of the family down to the secret working heart of the house below, and see the whole concealed world that a Victorian family lived within and a Victorian visitor never saw. Let us begin at the front door, with the face of the house, so that we may understand what the hidden rooms were hidden behind. We begin, as every visitor began, at the front door, and the front door itself was the first act of the house's great performance of separation, for it was not the only door into the house, and who used it and who did not was the first of the many divisions the house enforced. The front door was for the family and its guests. It opened onto the entrance hall, the first of the showrooms, the space designed to make the right impression on the visitor stepping in from the street. The hall of a good Victorian house was a considered thing, floored with tile or with polished wood, hung with pictures, furnished with the hall stand for hats and coats and umbrellas, lit to a careful effect, the whole arranged to say, at once, that this was a house of substance and taste. And rising from the hall was the staircase, the grand front staircase, the showpiece of the house's public architecture, sweeping up in its polished splendor to the floors above. This was the stair the family used, and the guests, the stair that was meant to be seen and admired, and it was one of the two staircases the house contained, for there was another, and the other was hidden, and the difference between them is the whole story of the house in miniature. But before we climb, let us look at the rooms that opened off the hall, the public rooms, the face of the house, for these are the rooms that everyone saw and that we must understand before we go behind them. There was the drawing room, the finest room in the house, the room of display and reception, where the family received its callers and sat in the evening and showed the world its taste and its wealth. There was the dining room, the other great showroom, where the dinners were given, where the family's silver and china were displayed, where the important business of formal hospitality was conducted. In a large house there might be a morning room besides, a lighter and less formal sitting room for the earlier part of the day, and a library, and other public or semi-public rooms, each with its purpose in the family's social life. These were the rooms the visitor saw, and they were arranged, all of them, toward the front of the house, on the good side, facing the street or the garden, catching the best light, presenting the house's best face to the world. And behind them, through a particular door that we are about to find, lay everything else, the whole hidden house, and the passing through that door was the crossing from the seen house to the unseen, from the world of the family and its guests to the world that ran beneath and behind it all. Let us find that door. Before we followed the family in through the front door, we passed over another entrance entirely, and we must go back and find it, for the wealthy house had more than one way in, and the difference between them was the difference between the whole worlds we have been exploring. While the family and its guests came in through the front door, into the fine hall, the servants and the tradesmen came in by another way altogether, through the servants' entrance, which in a townhouse was usually below, at the level of the basement, reached by steps down from the street, into the sunken space at the front of the house, called the area. The area was the sunken open space, guarded from the street by railings, that gave light and access to the basement, and down its steps came all the traffic of the working house, the servants coming and going, the tradesmen with their deliveries, the whole below-stairs commerce of the household, entering not through the fine front door, but down the area steps into the basement, the servant's own entrance to the servant's own world. This division of the entrances was the division of the house made visible at its very threshold, the front door, up its steps, for the family and the guests, opening onto the fine hall and the show of the house, the area steps, down to the basement, for the servants and the tradesmen, opening onto the working world below. The two entrances served the two worlds, and a person's status was announced by which door they used, the family and their equals at the front, the servants and the trade below, and never the reverse, for a tradesman who presented himself at the front door committed a real breach, and a guest would no more have gone down the area steps than flown. The house sorted its people at the door, the front for the served and the area for the serving, and the sorting began before one was even inside. And the area itself, that sunken space before the basement, was a little world of its own, the threshold of the servants' domain, where the deliveries were taken in, and the servants came and went, and the daily traffic of the working house passed. Here the tradesmen left their goods, the milk and the coal and the meat and the rest, taken in at the basement door by the servants. Here the servants stepped out, when they had reason to, into the street above by the area steps. It was the servants' own entrance and exit, their threshold to the outer world, as the front door was the family's, and it belonged, like everything below stairs, to the hidden working world of the house, the world that came and went by the area steps, while the family came and went by the door above, the two streams of traffic never mixing, each to its own threshold, at the very entrance to the divided house. The door is easy to miss, and it was meant to be. Somewhere at the back of the hall, or off a passage leading from it, there is a plain door, and it is covered, on the family's side, in a particular material, a green cloth, a heavy woolen felt, called baize, studded around its edge with a row of brass nails. This is the green baize door, and it is one of the most important objects in the whole Victorian house, for it is the border between the two worlds the house contained. On this side of it, the family's side, the house is polished and quiet and fine. On the other side of it lies the world of the servants, and the moment you pass through it, the house changes entirely. The green baize door was a real and standard feature of the larger Victorian house, and its purpose was precise. The baize itself served a practical function, for the thick woolen felt deadened sound, muffling the noise of the servants' work from reaching the family's rooms, and blocked the smells of the kitchen and the labor from drifting through to the polished front of the house. But the door was far more than a practical barrier. It was a symbol and a boundary, and everyone in the house understood exactly what it meant. It marked the line between the served and the serving, between the family's world and the servant's world, and the crossing of it in either direction was a crossing between two entirely different ways of life under a single roof. Step through it now and feel the house change around you. The polished floors give way to plain boards or stone. The pictures and the fine furnishings vanish. The careful lighting gives way to something plainer and dimmer. The very air changes, cooler and plainer, carrying now the distant sounds and smells of work that the baize had held back. You have passed, in a single step through a single door, from the front of the house to the back of it, from the world that was meant to be seen to the world that was meant to be hidden, and the contrast is immediate and total. This is the first and greatest of the house's divisions, and everything else we find tonight will be an elaboration of it, for the whole hidden house lies on this side of the green baize door, in the servant's world that the family's world was built to keep out of sight. The servants passed through this door many times a day, carrying the coal and the water and the trays and everything else the family needed, crossing from their world into the family's to do their work, and then retreating again to their own side. And the crossing was governed by rules, for a servant in the family's part of the house was meant to be as invisible as possible, to do what was needed and withdraw, never to linger, never to be seen more than could be helped. The green baize door was the membrane between the two worlds, and the servants moved back and forth across it all day, the living link between the seen house and the hidden one, belonging fully to neither, passing endlessly between them in the service of the family that lived on one side and the labor that lived on the other. Before we explore the servant's world in full, let us return to that matter of the two staircases, for it is one of the purest expressions of the whole principle on which the house was built, and it deserves to be understood properly. The grand front staircase we have seen rose from the hall, polished and handsome for the use of the family and its guests. But that stair did not serve the whole house, or rather, it served only the family's use of the house. For the servants, there was another stair entirely, a back staircase, plain and narrow and steep, tucked away on the servants' side of the house. And it was by this stair that the servants moved between the floors, carrying their loads up and down, from the working world below to the bedrooms above and back again. The two staircases ran through the same house, sometimes only a wall apart, and they never met, or met only at the points where a servant must cross into the family's world to do the work, and the keeping of them separate was the keeping separate of the two lives the house contained. Think about what this meant in the daily life of the house. The family went up and down their fine front stair, in the light and the polish, seeing no one but themselves and their guests. And meanwhile, behind the walls, up the hidden back stair, the servants climbed and descended all day, carrying the coal up to the bedroom fires, and the water up to the washstands, and the trays up to the rooms, and the slops, and the ashes down again, a whole ceaseless traffic of labor, moving up and down the concealed stair, unseen and unheard by the family whose life it supported. The two stairs were the two worlds made vertical, running up through the house side by side and never touching, the seen ascent and the hidden one, and a person who understood the house could read its whole philosophy in the simple fact of them. And the back stair was hard. It was steep and narrow and often dark, lit poorly if at all, and up it the servants carried loads that would tax anyone, the heavy coal scuttles and the cans of water that weighed enough to strain the arms and the back, many times a day, floor after floor, the housemaid climbing the back stair with her coals, the young footman with his cans of water, the whole staff moving their burdens up and down the mean concealed stair, while the family's fine stair stood empty and gleaming a wall away. This was the daily reality of the house's great division, and it fell, as the labor always fell, on the servants, whose hidden stair was as hard as the family's was handsome. The house gave its beauty to the family, and its labor to the servants, and the two staircases, the fine and the mean, were that division built into the very structure of the place, running up through it from bottom to top. Let us climb the family's stair now, up from the hall to the first floor above, where we find the first of the truly private rooms, the rooms that no visitor saw, the rooms where the family lived its own life away from the world. And the first we come to, in the house of a wealthy family, is a room that belonged particularly to the lady of the house, her own private retreat, and it was called the boudoir. The boudoir was the lady's private sitting room, her own personal room, distinct from the public drawing room below where she received her callers. The word itself comes from the French, and it carries an odd and revealing origin, for it derives from a word meaning to sulk, the boudoir being, in its first sense, the room a lady might withdraw to be alone, to be out of temper in private, to escape the demands of the household and the world. And that captures something true about the room, for the boudoir was, above all, a place of retreat, the one room in the whole house that belonged to the lady alone, where she could be private, where she could do as she pleased, where the endless performance of being the mistress of the house could, for a while, be set down. It was, as a rule, a pretty and a comfortable room, furnished to the lady's own taste, lighter and more personal than the formal rooms below. Here, she might have her writing desk, where she dealt with her correspondence and kept her private papers. Here she might have her comfortable chairs, her books, her work basket, her personal possessions, the things that were hers rather than the household's. Here she might sit alone, or receive only her most intimate friends, the visitors admitted to the boudoir being a select few, in a way that the callers to the drawing room were not. The boudoir was the inner sanctum of the lady's life, the private space behind the public one, and its very existence tells us something important, which is that even the mistress of the house, who seemed to command the whole domestic world, needed and valued a room of her own, a place to retreat from the very household she ran. There is something worth pausing on in this, for the boudoir was one of the few genuinely private spaces a woman of this class possessed, and its privacy was precious precisely because so little else in her life was private. Her days were spent in the management of the household and the performance of her social role, surrounded by family and servants and callers, rarely truly alone. The boudoir was her exception, her one reserved space, and the retreating to it was the claiming of a privacy that the rest of her life did not allow. That a woman who wanted for nothing material should so value a room simply to be alone in tells us how crowded and how public the rest of her existence was, how rare the solitude, how precious the single door she could close behind her against the whole demanding world of the house. Along the same floor and above lay the bedrooms, and the bedrooms of a Victorian house were more private and more numerous and more particularly arranged than we might expect, for the sleeping arrangements of a wealthy family in the 1880s followed rules and patterns that reveal a great deal about how that family lived. The principal bedroom was the finest, the room of the master and mistress of the house, though whether they shared it is itself a question with a more complicated answer than we might assume, and one we will come to. It was a large room, well furnished, with its great bed and its wardrobes and its washstand and its dressing table, and adjoining it, in a well-arranged house, there might be a dressing room, a smaller room opening off the bedroom where the business of dressing was done and the clothes were kept, and where, quite often, one of the couple might actually sleep. For the fashionable arrangement among the wealthy by this period was often for the husband and wife to have separate, but connected rooms, the wife in the bedroom and the husband in the dressing room, or each with their own room entirely, an arrangement that had nothing necessarily to do with the state of the marriage and everything to do with the value the age placed on privacy, on personal space, on the separation that ran through every aspect of the house. The other bedrooms ranged along the bedroom floor, and on the floor above, the rooms of the older children, the guest rooms kept ready for visitors, each a private chamber in the family's part of the house. The bedrooms were private in a way that is worth dwelling on, for they were the family's retreat from even each other, the individual spaces where each member of the household could be alone, and the having of a room of one's own, a private bedroom, was one of the marks of the comfortable classes, distinguishing them sharply from the poor, whose whole families crowded into a single room and slept together for want of any alternative. The wealthy Victorian family spread itself through many private rooms, each person with their own space, and this spreading out, this privacy, this room for each, was one of the great luxuries that wealth bought, and one of the sharpest divisions between how the rich lived and how the poor did. The bedrooms also carried their own hidden labor, for the making of them comfortable was a constant work that fell, unseen, on the servants. The fires laid and lit in the bedroom grates on cold mornings, the washstands supplied with fresh water, and the slops carried away, the beds made, and the linen changed, the rooms cleaned and dusted and set to rights. All of this happened in the family's private rooms, done by the housemaids who slipped in to do their work and slipped out again, ideally while the family was elsewhere, so that the comfort of the bedroom should appear as if by magic, and the labor that produced it remain invisible. The private bedroom, the family's retreat, was maintained by hidden hands, and the housemaid who kept it was one more of the unseen figures whose work ran beneath the family's comfortable life. Let us come back down, though, and find a set of rooms we have passed over, for the house divided its space not only between family and servants, and between public and private, but between the sexes, and there were rooms in the Victorian house that belonged particularly to the men, masculine territories within the domestic world, and they are worth finding. Chief among them was the study, or the library, the master's own room, the male equivalent of the lady's boudoir, his private retreat, and his territory. Here, the master of the house kept his books, his papers, his business, his private affairs. Here he could withdraw from the family and the household into a room that was his, furnished in the heavier and plainer and more masculine style that the age thought proper to a man's room, the dark wood and the leather and the sober comfort that distinguished the male rooms from the lighter feminine spaces. The study was where he dealt with his correspondence and his accounts, where he saw anyone who came on business, where he retreated to read or to smoke, or simply to be alone, and it was understood to be his in a way that few other rooms in the house were, a territory the rest of the household entered by his leave. In the grander houses, there were further male rooms, whole territories given over to masculine pursuits. There was the billiard room, if the house ran to one, built to hold the great billiard table that was the center of a particular kind of male social life, where the gentlemen might retire to play and to talk and to smoke, away from the ladies, in an atmosphere of male leisure. And there was, by this period, in many houses, the smoking room, a room set aside specifically for the smoking of tobacco, which the age regarded as a male habit unsuitable for the presence of ladies and unsuitable for the main rooms of the house. The smoking room was where the men withdrew to smoke their cigars and pipes, often in the evening after the ladies had retired, and it was fitted up for the purpose, sometimes in an exotic or masculine style, a male sanctuary within the house, where the men could indulge the habit that was banished from the family's rooms. These male rooms tell us something about the deep division of the sexes that shaped the Victorian house and the Victorian life. The men had their territories, the study and the billiard room and the smoking room, spaces of male retreat and male sociability, where they could withdraw from the mixed life of the family into the company of their own sex or the solitude of their own pursuits. And this answered to the withdrawing of the women into their own spaces, the boudoir and the drawing room, so that the house was divided, room by room, into male and female territories, the sexes, each with their own spaces to retreat to, coming together in the shared rooms and withdrawing, each to their own side, in the rooms reserved to their sex. The house was a map of the age's whole idea of the sexes, the separate spheres of men and women rendered in rooms and doors, each sex with its proper territory, the whole domestic world divided down the middle between them. Now let us climb again, higher this time, up toward the top of the house, for there was a whole world up there, on the upper floors, that the family visited but did not truly inhabit, the world of the children, and it was a separate kingdom with its own rooms and its own rules and its own presiding powers, and it is one of the most revealing of all the hidden regions of the Victorian house. The children of a wealthy Victorian family did not live among the adults. They lived apart, in their own quarters, high in the house, in the nursery and its attached rooms, and they came down to the family's part of the house only at appointed times and under supervision. The nursery was the heart of this children's kingdom, a large room or a set of rooms given over entirely to the young children of the family and to the servants who cared for them. It was a world unto itself, high above the family's rooms, with its own routines and its own daily life that ran largely independent of the household below, and the children who lived in it might see their own parents for only an hour or two a day, brought down, washed and dressed, and on their best behavior, to be with the adults for a while, before being taken up again to their own world at the top of the house. The nursery world was ruled by the nurse, the nanny, who had charge of the children and their rooms, and who reigned over her small kingdom with an authority that was, within those rooms, nearly absolute. Under her might be nursery maids to help with the work and the care, and together these women ran the children's whole daily life, the feeding and the washing and the dressing and the minding, the whole labor of raising the young children of the family, which the mother largely delegated to them. The nursery had its own meals, prepared below and carried up, its own fire, its own routines of sleep and waking and play, a complete small world of its own, high in the house, where the children spent the greater part of their early lives in the care of servants, seeing their parents as visitors to their world rather than as its daily presence. And as the children grew, there was the schoolroom, for the education of the children of such a family began at home, in a room set aside for the purpose, under a governess. The schoolroom was where the daughters of the family and the sons, before they went away to school, received their lessons, and it was another of the upper rooms, another part of the children's separate world, presided over by the governess, whose own position in the house was one of the strangest and loneliest of all, as we shall see. The nursery and the schoolroom together made up the children's kingdom at the top of the house, a whole separate domain where the young of the family were raised and taught, apart from the adults, in the care of the servants and the governess, visited by their parents, but not shared with them, a hidden world above the family's world, as the servants' world lay hidden below it. The governess who taught in the schoolroom deserves a moment of her own, for she occupied one of the most peculiar and most affecting positions in the whole house, and her place in it, or rather her lack of a settled place, tells us something about how rigidly the house divided its people. The governess was a problem the house did not quite know how to solve, for she fitted none of its categories. She was not a servant, in the ordinary sense, for she was a lady by birth and education, often the daughter of a clergyman or a professional man fallen on hard times, forced to earn her living in the one respectable way open to an educated woman of her class. But she was not family either, for she was an employee, paid to teach the children, dependent on the household for her position. She existed in between, neither above stairs nor below, neither served nor quite serving, and the house, built entirely on clear divisions, had no clear place for a person who fell between them. And so the governess lived a curiously isolated life, belonging nowhere in the house's scheme. She could not associate as an equal with the family, for she was their employee, of a lower station than they, kept at a certain distance. But she could not associate with the servants either, for she was a lady, above them in class, and the servants themselves would have resented her presuming to their company, and resented equally her airs of gentility. She ate, often, alone, or with the children, neither at the family's table nor at the servants', a person apart, isolated by the very in-betweenness of her position. She had her own small room, usually, near the schoolroom and the nursery, in the children's part of the house, and there she spent her solitary hours, a lady without the position of a lady, a worker without the fellowship of the workers, alone in the midst of the crowded house. A real sadness runs through the governess's position, and the age itself half recognized it, for the figure of the lonely governess became a staple of the novels of the period, her isolation and her ambiguous status, a subject that clearly touched something in the Victorian imagination. She was the educated woman with no place, the lady forced to labor, caught between the classes in a society that had no room for anyone who did not fit its divisions cleanly, and her physical place in the house, or her lack of one, her solitary room, and her solitary meals, and her belonging to neither world, was the visible expression of her impossible social position, a person the house could not place, because the age could not place her, isolated in the schoolroom, at the top of the house, teaching other women's children, alone. Higher still, above even the nursery, at the very top of the house, under the roof, lay the rooms where the servants slept, and to reach them we must leave the family's world entirely and climb again the hidden back stair, up to the attic floor, where the house kept its servants at night. The servants' bedrooms were in the attic, under the roof, the least desirable rooms in the whole house, and their placing there was no accident. The attic was hot in summer, under the sun-baked roof, and cold in winter, for it was rarely heated, the servants not being thought to need the fires that warmed the family's rooms. The rooms were small and plain and meanly furnished, a narrow bed, a washstand, a chest for the servants' few possessions, a chair perhaps, the bare necessities and nothing more. The ceilings sloped under the roof, cramping the space. The windows were small. These were the poorest rooms in the house, and they were where the servants slept, high above the family, tucked under the roof, out of sight and out of mind, in quarters as plain as the families were fine. The placing of the servants at the top of the house, under the roof, completed the vertical scheme we have been climbing all along. The family lived in the good rooms in the middle floors, with the best of everything, the fine rooms and the comfortable bedrooms, and the warmth and the space. Above them, the children in their nursery kingdom, and above even that, at the very top, under the roof, the servants in their mean attic rooms, while below, as we are about to descend to see, in the basement, lay the working world where those same servants labored. The servants were housed at the two extremes of the house, sleeping at the top under the roof and working at the bottom in the basement, with the family's world in between, and they traveled between their attic beds and their basement work by the hidden back stair, passing through or behind the family's floors without truly entering them, top to bottom and back again, all the length of the house. And the servants' bedrooms held their own small privacies and their own small sadnesses, for they were the only space in the whole house that belonged, even a little, to the servants themselves. A servant's attic room, mean as it was the one place she could be alone, off duty, herself, the one corner of the great house that was in any sense hers. There she kept her few possessions, the small treasures of a life lived largely in the service of others, the letters from home, the few keepsakes, the modest clothes that were her own. There she slept her few hours, and rose in the dark to begin again. And there, in the plain attic room under the roof, a servant might have the only privacy and the only rest her hard life allowed, in the poorest room of the rich house she kept, at the very top, under the eaves, as far from the family's fine rooms as it was possible to be, while still beneath the same roof. Now let us descend, all the way down, past the family's floors, past the ground floor with its public rooms, down below the level of the street itself, into the basement, for it was here, underground, that the true working heart of the Victorian house lay, the hidden domain where the whole household was run, and it is the largest and most important of all the hidden regions we will explore tonight. The basement of a large Victorian house was a world entire, a warren of working rooms below the ground, lit by the small high windows that looked out at the level of the street or into the sunken area at the front, dim and cool and busy, where the real labor of the household happened out of sight and below the family altogether. Here were the kitchen and its attendant rooms, the offices of the household as the age called them, the whole apparatus of cooking and cleaning and storage that kept the family fed and served. The family rarely came down here. This was the servants' domain, the working underworld of the house, and the family's contact with it was mostly through the food and the service that rose from it and the orders that descended to it, the basement running the house from below like an engine room beneath a ship, unseen by the passengers whose voyage it powered. At the heart of the basement was the kitchen, and the kitchen was the beating heart of the whole working house, the room where the food was cooked and around which the whole below-stairs world revolved. It was a large room, and a hot one, dominated by the great cooking range, the massive iron construction that burned coal and provided the heat for all the cooking, and that had to be kept burning, and blacked, and tended, a labor in itself. Around the kitchen were ranged the tools and the surfaces of the cook's trade, the great table for the preparation of food, the shelves of pots and pans, and the battery of copper that a well-equipped kitchen displayed, the whole apparatus of cooking for a large household. And here the cook reigned, in her hot domain, producing the meals that rose to the family's table, from the early breakfast to the late dinner, the whole day's food flowing out of this hot underground room and up, by the back stairs and the service routes, to the dining room above. The kitchen was hot, and it was hard, and it was the workplace of some of the hardest worked servants in the house. The heat of the range made it sweltering, especially in summer, and the work was constant, the preparing and the cooking and the timing of the many meals of a large household, day after day. It was also, by its nature, placed as far as possible from the family's rooms, down in the basement, so that the heat and the smells and the noise of the cooking should not reach the family above, so that the family might enjoy the food without any awareness of the hot, hard labor that produced it. The kitchen was hidden, like everything else in the servants' world, tucked away below ground, its labor invisible, its product alone permitted to rise into the family's sight. And it was the center of the whole hidden house, the working heart around which the entire below-stairs world was arranged. And the kitchen was equipped for labor on a scale we can barely imagine, for the cooking of a great household's food, meal after meal, day after day, required a whole armory of tools and vessels and equipment. The great range with its ovens and its hot plates and its arrangements for roasting and boiling, the battery of copper pots and pans, tinned within and polished without, ranged in their sizes on the walls and shelves, the molds and the tins and the specialized vessels for the many dishes the age produced, the knives and the boards and the mortars and the sieves and the whole apparatus of preparation, the great scrubbed table where the work was done, all of it kept and cleaned and maintained and used in the constant production of the household's food, and all of it needing its own care, the copper to be scoured and the range to be blacked, and the whole equipment kept in the order that the work required. The kitchen was a workshop, a manufactory of food, equipped and staffed for continuous production, and it ran all day, every day, turning the raw materials that came in at the basement door into the finished meals that rose to the family's table, the hidden engine of the household's daily sustenance, laboring away in the basement while the family lived, above, on the food it produced. Off the kitchen and around it lay a whole cluster of specialized working rooms, each with its own function, for the work of a great household was divided among many rooms as it was divided among many servants, and the basement was a maze of these specialized spaces, each dedicated to its own part of the domestic labor. There was the scullery, the room where the dirtiest and roughest of the kitchen work was done, the washing up above all. Here was the great sink, or the sinks, where the endless mountains of dishes and pots and pans were washed, and here worked the scullery maid, the lowest of all the kitchen servants, the youngest and the hardest worked, whose life was spent in the rough, wet labor of the scullery, scrubbing and washing and cleaning the vessels of the household from early morning to late at night. The scullery was the hardest and meanest workplace in the house, and the scullery maid its hardest worked servant, and her labor, hidden even within the hidden world of the basement, was among the most thankless in the whole household. There was the larder, the cool room where the food was stored, placed on the cool side of the house, away from the heat of the kitchen, where the meat and the fish and the perishable foods were kept, in the age before any refrigeration, on cold stone shelves, in the coolest space the house could provide. There was the pantry, or the butler's pantry, the domain of the butler in a house that kept one, where the silver and the glass were kept and cleaned, and where the butler often slept, guarding the valuable plate. There was, in the larger and grander houses, the still room, a room that had once been for the distilling of cordials and medicines, and that had become a kind of secondary kitchen, presided over by the housekeeper or the still room maid, where the finer things were made, the preserves and the cakes and the confections and the tea things, a more genteel workplace than the main kitchen. The housekeeper's room was her own territory, her office and her sitting room combined, from which she ran the female side of the household. The housekeeper, in a large house, was the senior female servant, the commander of the maids, the keeper of the stores and the linen and the accounts of the household supplies, and her room was her headquarters, where she kept her records and her keys, the keys being the very symbol of her authority, for she held the keys to the storerooms and the cupboards where the household's valuable supplies were locked away. Her room was more comfortable than the other servants' spaces, befitting her rank, and there she might take her own tea and receive the upper servants and conduct the business of the household's management, a small domain of authority within the servants' world, from which the whole female staff was directed. There was one more great department of the household's labor that needs its own rooms, and it was among the hardest of all, and that was the laundry, for the washing of a large household's linen and clothes was an enormous undertaking, and where it was done at home, it required its own dedicated spaces and its own hard-working servants. The washing of a great house was a mountain of labor. Consider all that had to be washed: the household linen, the sheets, and the tablecloths, and the towels, and the napkins, in great quantity, changed regularly, and needing constant washing. The family's clothes, the many garments of a well-dressed family, the shirts and the underclothes and all the washable things, the servants' own clothes, the whole vast accumulation of dirty linen that a large household generated week by week, all of it to be washed, by hand, in an age before any washing machine, in a process of enormous labor that consumed days of hard work. And the washing had its own rooms, in a house that did its own laundry. There was the laundry itself, or the wash house, where the washing was done, fitted with the coppers for heating the water, and the great tubs for the washing, and the whole apparatus of the hand laundry. Here the laundry maids labored at one of the hardest of all the household's tasks, the washing done by hand, the linen scrubbed and boiled and rinsed and wrung, in the heat and the steam and the wet, hour after hour, day after day of the washing week. And there was the drying, in the drying room or on the lines, and then the great labor of the ironing, the linen and the clothes, all to be pressed with the heavy flat irons heated at the fire, another day of hot, hard work, so that the clean linen might be returned, pressed and folded, to the cupboards and the drawers of the house. The laundry was among the hardest and hottest and wettest of all the household's labors, and the laundry maids among its hardest worked servants, and their work, done in the wash house and the drying room and the ironing room, was one more of the hidden labors of the house, tucked away in its own working spaces, out of the family's sight. The family saw only the result, the clean pressed linen appearing fresh in the cupboards, the clean clothes ready to wear, and never the steam and the labor of the wash house, where the great weekly battle with the household's dirt was fought and won by the hard hands of the laundry maids. The clean linen of the comfortable house was the product of some of the hardest labor in it, and the laundry, hidden in its working rooms, was where that labor was done. And there was one more room in the servants' world that we must not pass over, for it was the heart of the servants' own life, as the kitchen was the heart of their work, and that was the servants' hall, the room where the servants gathered and ate and lived their own common life below stairs. The servants' hall was the servants' equivalent of the family's dining room and drawing room combined, the common room of the below-stairs world, where the staff assembled for their meals and spent what little leisure their hard days allowed. Here the servants ate, at their own table, in their own hierarchy, for the servants' world had its own strict order that mirrored the family's, and the seating at the servants' table followed rules of rank as precise as any that governed the family above. The upper servants, the butler and the housekeeper and the cook and the lady's maid and the valet, took precedence over the lower, and the order of the servants' hall was observed as carefully below stairs as the order of precedence was observed above, the servants keeping among themselves a hierarchy every bit as elaborate as the one that ranked them all together beneath the family. There was, indeed, a whole social world below stairs, complete in itself, with its own ranks and its own rules and its own tensions and its own community, and the servants' hall was its center. Here the news and the gossip of the household passed among the staff. Here the alliances and the rivalries of the servants' world played out. Here, at the common table, the whole staff came together, briefly, in the intervals of their labor, and were, for a while, not the isolated functionaries of the family's service, but a community of their own, sharing their meals and their talk and their common life in the one room that was theirs. The servants' hall was where the below-stairs world was most itself, most a society rather than a mere workforce, and it was one of the few comforts of a servant's hard life, the fellowship of the hall, the company of others in the same condition, the common life below stairs that the family above never saw and rarely thought about at all. One particular thing is worth noticing about the servants' hall and the whole below-stairs world, which is how completely it was a world of its own, running parallel to the family's world and largely invisible to it. The family knew, in a general way, that the servants existed and ate and had their lives below stairs, but they did not truly know that world, did not enter it, did not share in its community or its concerns, did not think of the servants as people with a full social life of their own going on in the rooms below. And meanwhile, that world was as rich and as full as any, with its friendships and its quarrels, its romances and its rivalries, its whole human drama, playing out in the servants' hall and the kitchen and the basement passages, an entire society living beneath the family's feet, hidden in the basement of the house, as real and as full of life as the family's world above, and almost entirely unknown to it. Deeper still into the basement, in the coldest and darkest corners, lay the cellars, the storage places for the things the household kept in quantity, and two of them are worth finding, for they held two of the things the house could not do without, and they tell their own story of the labor and the comfort of the Victorian home. One was the wine cellar, the cool, dark room where the master's wines were kept, laid down in their bins, maturing in the steady cool that the underground room provided. We have spoken before of the importance of wine to the Victorian household, of the succession of fine wines that a dinner required, and all of it was stored here, in the wine cellar, the master's own domain within the basement, for the cellar was the one part of the servants' world that the master concerned himself with directly, the wine being his particular responsibility and his particular pride. The cellar was kept locked, the wine being valuable, and the key held closely, and the bringing up of the wine for a dinner was a small ceremony of its own. The descent into the cool, dark cellar, and the selection of the bottles, and the carrying of them up to the light. The wine cellar was a treasure house, in its way, holding a considerable value in its bins, the accumulated cellar of a family that dined well, kept cool and dark, and locked in the basement of the house. The coal cellar was the opposite of the wine cellar in every way, for if the wine was the treasure of the basement, the coal was its curse, the black, dirty fuel on which the whole house ran, and that had to be stored and carried and burned in enormous quantities. For the Victorian house ran on coal, entirely. Every fire in every grate burned coal. The kitchen range burned coal. The whole warmth of the house, and the whole cooking of its food, depended on coal, and the coal had to be kept somewhere, in quantity, and that somewhere was the coal cellar, a black and filthy space in the basement where the coal was stored, delivered by the coal merchant down a chute from the street above, filling the cellar with the black fuel that the household would burn through in its endless fires. And the coal had to be carried from the cellar to every fire in the house, and this was one of the hardest and dirtiest of all the labors of the servants. The coal was heavy, and it was filthy, and it had to be carried up in scuttles and buckets from the cellar in the basement to the fires on every floor, up the back stairs, all the way to the top of the house, many times a day, to feed the many fires that warmed the many rooms. The housemaid who carried the coal, black-handed, up the stairs, floor after floor, was doing one of the defining labors of the Victorian house, the constant hauling of the heavy, dirty fuel that the whole comfort of the household depended on, and the coal cellar, black and grim in the depths of the basement, was the source of it all, the dirty secret beneath the warm, bright rooms above, the black heart of the house's hidden labor. Now that we have descended to the working heart of the house, let us pause over the system that connected it to the family's world above, the ingenious and revealing arrangement by which the family, in its comfortable rooms, summoned the servants from the depths below, for it was one of the cleverest and most telling pieces of the whole machinery of the house, the bells. Throughout the family's rooms, there were bell pulls, or bell handles, one in each room, and when the family wanted a servant, they pulled the bell, and the pull, by a system of wires and cranks running through the walls of the house, rang a bell below stairs, in the servants' quarters, where a whole row of bells hung, one for each room, so that the servants could see, by which bell rang, which room required them. The bellboard in the servants' passage, with its row of bells each labeled with its room, was the nerve center of the house's service, the point where the family's summons arrived and the servants were dispatched to answer it, and the ringing of the bells punctuated the whole day below stairs, calling the servants up, again and again, to answer the needs of the family above. Consider what this system accomplished and what it reveals. It allowed the family to summon a servant from anywhere in the house, instantly, by the simple pull of a bell, without raising their voice, without moving, without any effort at all. The servant appeared, as if by magic, summoned from the unseen depths, to do whatever was wanted, and then to withdraw again. And this was precisely the ideal that the whole house was built to serve, the family's comfort attended to by servants who appeared when wanted and vanished when not, present to serve and absent otherwise, the labor available at the pull of a bell and invisible the rest of the time. The bell system was the mechanism of that ideal, the means by which the hidden servants could be called from their hidden world to serve and then dismissed back into it, and it embodied, in wires and bells, the whole relationship between the family and the servants, the summoning and the serving and the withdrawing, the labor on call and otherwise unseen. And for the servants, the bells were the sound of their servitude, the constant call to labor that could come at any moment, from any room, and that had to be answered at once. The bell rang, and a servant must go, whatever they were doing, up the stairs to answer it, to see what was wanted, and to do it. The bells ruled the servant's day, their sudden ringing interrupting whatever work or rest the servant might be at, summoning them up to the family's world at the family's whim. There was no ignoring a bell, no delay in answering it, for the whole point of the system was the instant response, the servant appearing promptly when called. And so the servants lived at the command of the bells, their days broken by the constant summons, always listening for the ring that would call them up, always ready to answer. The bells, the very voice of the family's authority, reaching down into the servant's world to call its labor up whenever it was wanted. Let us climb back up now, out of the basement, and go in search of the truly hidden rooms, the small concealed spaces that the house tucked away in its corners and its unused places. For beyond the great divisions of family and servant and the specialized working rooms, the Victorian house was full of smaller hidden spaces, the box rooms and the closets and the concealed cupboards that filled its odd corners and held the overflow of its crowded life. There was, in most large houses, a box room, a small room given over to storage and named for the boxes and trunks it held, the luggage of the family stored between journeys, the trunks and cases that a traveling family accumulated. But the box room held more than luggage, for it became, as such rooms do, the store for everything the house did not currently need, but did not wish to throw away, the overflow of a crowded material life, the furniture out of use, and the possessions out of season, and the accumulated objects of a family that owned a great deal, all stored away in the box room, out of sight, kept against some future need. The box room was the house's memory, and its attic in the old sense, the place where things were put away and half forgotten, and to open its door was to find the layered deposits of the family's life, the things they had owned and used and set aside, stored in the dim, forgotten room. Then the closets and the cupboards, built into the odd spaces of the house, under the stairs and in the thickness of the walls and in the corners of the rooms, for a house holds a great deal, and all of it must be stored somewhere, and the Victorian house was riddled with storage, with the cupboards and closets that held the linen and the china and the glass and the household goods and the endless possessions of a well-provided family. The space under the main staircase, that awkward triangular void, was almost always a cupboard, holding whatever was put there, and every landing and every corner had its built-in storage, its concealed cupboards holding the goods of the household. These were hidden spaces in the most literal sense, the concealed cavities of the house, built into its structure, holding its possessions out of sight. And there was, above all, the linen room, or the linen cupboard, which deserves its own mention, for the linen of a large household was a treasure and a responsibility, and its storage was a matter of real importance. The sheets and the tablecloths and the towels and the napkins, the whole vast stock of household linen that a great house required, was kept in the linen room, a room or a large cupboard fitted with shelves, where the linen was stored, counted, and cared for. It was the housekeeper's particular charge, the linen being valuable and requiring management, kept in order on its shelves, counted regularly against loss, mended when it wore, the whole great stock of it maintained as one of the household's serious assets. The linen room, warm and dry and orderly, its shelves stacked with the folded white linen, was one of the quiet hidden rooms of the house, a place of storage and care, holding the household's linen treasure in its scented, ordered shelves. We have met many servants in our walk through the house, in their many rooms and at their many labors, and it is worth pausing now to understand the whole order of them, the elaborate hierarchy that ranked the servants among themselves, for the below-stairs world was not a mass of undifferentiated labor, but a finely graded ladder, as carefully ordered as the society above. At the top of the servants' hierarchy stood the upper servants, the senior figures who commanded the rest. In a grand house, there might be a butler, the senior male servant, who commanded the male staff and took charge of the dining room and the wine and the whole formal service of the house. There was the housekeeper, the senior female servant, who commanded the maids and kept the stores and ran the female side of the household. There was the cook, who ruled the kitchen. There was, for the lady, her own lady's maid, and for the master, his valet, the personal servants who attended to their persons and their clothes. These were the upper servants, the aristocracy of the below-stairs world, and they enjoyed privileges the lower servants did not: better rooms, better food, the deference of those beneath them, and a real authority within their spheres. Below them ranged the lower servants, the great body of the staff, who did the bulk of the actual labor, the housemaids who cleaned the rooms and made the beds, and carried the coal and the water, the kitchen maids and the scullery maid, who did the work of the kitchen under the cook, the footmen in a grand house, who waited at table and answered the door and did the male service of the household, the laundry maids who did the washing, the various other maids and men who filled the lower ranks, each with their assigned labors, each in their place in the order. And at the very bottom, the youngest and the lowest, the scullery maid and the hall boy and the between maid, the servants who did the hardest and meanest work for the least reward, at the bottom of the whole long ladder. And the hierarchy was observed among the servants with a strictness that might surprise us, for the servants themselves maintained their own order as rigidly as the family maintained the order above. The upper servants did not mix with the lower as equals. The precedence of the servants' hall was observed. The lower servants deferred to the upper, and the upper commanded the lower, and the whole below-stairs world ran on a hierarchy every bit as elaborate and every bit as jealously guarded as the one that ranked the whole household beneath the family. The servant who rose through the ranks, from scullery maid to kitchen maid to cook, or from housemaid toward housekeeper, climbed a ladder as real as any in the world above, and the order of the servants, from the butler at the top to the scullery maid at the bottom, was one more of the hidden structures of the house, the elaborate ranking of the people who served, mirroring below stairs the whole ordered hierarchy of the world above. There was a small hidden space in the wealthy house that held more concentrated value than any other, and it is worth finding, for it tells us something about what the age treasured and how it guarded it, and that is the place where the silver was kept, the plate safe, or the strong room. The silver of a wealthy household, the plate as it was called, was a treasure of real magnitude, for the family of standing owned silver in great quantity, the dishes and the serving pieces and the candlesticks and the whole array of the table silver, and beyond that the ornamental silver, the great pieces displayed and used on grand occasions. This was wealth in a very concentrated and portable and stealable form, and it had to be guarded, and so the wealthy house kept its silver in a secure place, a plate safe, a strongly built and locked storage, or in the grandest houses, a whole strong room, a secure chamber with a heavy door, where the silver was kept locked away when not in use. The guarding of the plate was one of the particular responsibilities of the butler in a house that kept one, and it was a serious charge, for the silver was valuable, and the temptation to theft was real, both from outside the house and, the age worried, from within it. The butler often slept near the plate, in his pantry adjoining the safe, the better to guard it, and the silver was counted and checked, and kept locked, brought out for use, and returned to its secure keeping after, watched over, with the care its value demanded. The plate safe, hidden away in the butler's domain, held a concentrated treasure, the accumulated silver of a wealthy family, locked and guarded in its secure chamber, one of the most valuable and most carefully hidden of all the hidden spaces of the house. And the strong room, or the plate safe, stands for something about the whole wealthy house, which was, among all its other characters, a repository of valuable things, a store of accumulated wealth, in the form of possessions: the silver, the jewels, the fine china, the pictures, the furniture. The whole material abundance of the wealthy house represented a great value, accumulated and displayed and stored, and the house had to guard it, to keep it secure, to protect the treasure it held. The hidden places where the most valuable things were kept, the plate safe and the jewel case and the locked cabinets, were the strong boxes of the house, the secure hidden spaces where its concentrated wealth was guarded. And they were as much a part of the hidden house as the servants' rooms and the storage cupboards, the treasure chambers of a house that held, in its rooms and its safes, the accumulated material wealth of a fortunate family. We have not yet found one room, or rather a small set of rooms, and that the Victorian house was, by the 1880s, increasingly making space for, and it tells a story of change, of the slow arrival of a comfort we now take entirely for granted, and that is the bathroom and the water closet. For most of the century, the Victorian house had no bathroom in our sense. Washing was done, as we have seen, at the washstand in the bedroom, with water carried up by hand, and the necessary functions of the body were dealt with, for most of the century, by the chamber pot and the close stool in the bedroom, and by the privy or the earth closet outside or in the basement, the whole business conducted without running water, the waste carried away by hand, by the servants, as one of the least pleasant of all their many labors. This was the reality of even the wealthy house for much of the Victorian age, a house without plumbing, its washing done from cans and basins, its waste carried out by hand. But by the 1880s, this was changing, and the change was one of the great quiet revolutions of domestic life. The water closet, the flushing lavatory connected to a drain, was spreading through the houses of the comfortable classes, bringing running water to carry the waste away, and ending, or beginning to end, the age of the chamber pot and the hand-carried slop. And the bathroom, a room dedicated to bathing, with a fixed bath supplied with water, was appearing too, in the better houses, ending the age of the portable bath filled by hand and bringing the luxury of the dedicated bathing room. These were new rooms, added to the house as the new plumbing made them possible, and their arrival marked the beginning of the modern house, the house with its bathroom and its water closet, its plumbing bringing water in and carrying waste away, the house we would recognize. And the significance of this for the servants was enormous, though it came slowly and unevenly, for the plumbing that brought water to the upper floors and carried the waste away by drain relieved the servants of two of their hardest and most unpleasant labors, the carrying of water up and the carrying of slops down. As the plumbing spread, the endless hauling of water and waste that had defined so much of the servants' lives began, slowly, to ease. But it came gradually and unevenly, and for much of the 1880s, the transition was incomplete. The new plumbing, serving some rooms and not others, some houses and not others, the old hand labor persisting alongside the new conveniences. The bathroom and the water closet were the future arriving, the beginning of the modern, comfortable house, and their appearance in the Victorian house of the 1880s was the first sign of the great change that would, in time, transform domestic life and begin to make the whole vast apparatus of hand labor and the army of servants who performed it slowly. Let us pause in our walk and consider the whole design of the house from above, as it were, the thinking that shaped it, for the arrangement of all these rooms, the divisions and the separations and the hidden regions, was not accidental, but deliberate, the product of a whole philosophy of the house that the architects of the age worked out with great care and set down in their books. The Victorian age produced a considerable literature on the design of houses, and the greatest of these works, the book that laid out the whole philosophy of the gentleman's house most fully, was written by an architect named Robert Kerr and published under the title The Gentleman's House, and it is worth knowing something of what it argued, for it explains the house we have been walking through. Kerr's great principle, the principle that governed the whole design of the house, was exactly the separation we have seen everywhere, and he stated it plainly. The family and the servants were to be kept apart. Their ways through the house were to be separate. Their rooms were to be separate. The two worlds were to coexist under one roof without intruding on each other, and the whole art of designing the house lay in arranging this separation, in planning the house so that the family's life and the servant's labor could go on side by side and yet apart, each in its own sphere, connected only where the service required and otherwise entirely divided. This was the conscious philosophy of the house, set down in the architect's books and built into the plans they drew. The separation of family and servants was not an accident of how the house happened to be used, but the very principle on which it was designed, thought out and argued for, and rendered in the arrangement of the rooms and the passages and the stairs. The architect planning a gentleman's house thought first of this separation, planned the two worlds and their divisions, arranged the family's rooms toward the front and the light, and the servants' rooms toward the back and the basement, laid out the separate stairs and the separate passages, designed the whole house around the keeping apart of the people who would live in it. The hidden rooms we have found were hidden by design, in the most literal sense, planned to be hidden by architects who made a philosophy of the hiding. And there was another principle Kerr and his fellow architects insisted on, closely related, and that was the separation of the different functions of the house, the giving of a separate room to each purpose, the specialization of space that we have seen everywhere. Each activity was to have its own room, the eating in the dining room, the receiving in the drawing room, the sleeping in the bedroom, the cooking in the kitchen, the washing up in the scullery, and so on through the whole long list of the house's functions, each assigned its own dedicated space. This specialization, this proliferation of single-purpose rooms was itself a mark of the wealthy house and the considered design, distinguishing it sharply from the houses of the poor, where a single room served every purpose at once. The gentleman's house spread its functions through many specialized rooms, each designed for its one use, and this too was a principle of the design, the ordered separation of the activities of life into their many proper rooms. Set against all this, the many rooms and the careful separations and the specialized spaces of the wealthy house, let us remember for a moment how the other end of society lived, for the contrast is the necessary measure of everything we have seen, and it is stark almost beyond belief. While the wealthy family spread itself through its many rooms, each person with their own private space, the poor of the same age lived crowded, many to a room, whole families in a single room, sometimes several families in a single house, in the courts and the tenements and the slums of the same cities where the great houses stood. A poor family might live, eat, sleep, and conduct their whole lives in one room, parents and children together, without privacy, without separation, without any of the specialization of space that the wealthy house made its principle. The single room was kitchen and bedroom and parlor all at once, the whole family's life compressed into it, and the very idea of a separate room for each purpose, a boudoir for sulking in, a room simply for smoking, would have seemed a fantasy from another world. The contrast between these two ways of living, in the same cities, in the same years, is one of the great facts of the Victorian age, and the hidden rooms of the wealthy house take on their full meaning only when set against it. The wealthy family that felt the need for a private retreat, a room to be alone in, away from the crowded demands of its own comfortable house, lived a few streets away from families for whom privacy of any kind was an impossibility, for whom a room of one's own was unimaginable, for whom the whole family crowded into a single space was simply how life was. The luxury of space, of separation, of a room for each person and each purpose, that the wealthy house embodied, was a luxury measured against the crowding of the poor, and the two existed side by side, the spacious house with its many hidden rooms, and the single room with its crowded family, in the same age, in the same city, the two ends of a society divided as sharply in its housing as in everything else. And the servants stood, as ever, between the two. For the servants who worked in the wealthy house came, most of them, from the world of the poor, from families that lived in the crowded single rooms, and they entered the wealthy house and lived amid its space and its separation, while possessing, themselves, only the mean attic room at the top. The servant knew both worlds, the crowded poverty she came from, and the spacious wealth she served, and she belonged fully to neither, living in the great house, but not of it, surrounded by a space and a comfort that were not hers, her own portion of the house's abundance, only the plain attic room and the hard labor that earned it. The servant was the living link between the two worlds, the wealthy house and the poor one, carrying in her own person the whole vast distance between them, the distance that the age had built into its very houses, into the difference between the mansion with its many rooms and the single room where the poor family lived its whole crowded life. Let us go back into the house and find the passages, for we have spoken of the rooms but not of the ways between them, and the circulation of the Victorian house, the corridors and passages by which its people moved, was as carefully divided as everything else, and it holds its own hidden story. The family moved through the house by one set of ways, the fine hall and the grand stair and the corridors of the family's floors, all handsomely finished, part of the show of the house. But the servants moved by another set of ways entirely, the service passages, the narrow corridors, and the back stairs, and the concealed routes that ran through the house behind and beside the family's ways, allowing the servants to move from the basement to the rooms and back again without passing through the family's part of the house. These service passages were the hidden circulation of the house, the concealed arteries through which the servants and their labor flowed, running behind the walls and beside the fine rooms, a whole secondary network of movement that let the servants reach every part of the house, while remaining, as far as possible, unseen. In the grandest houses, this went to remarkable lengths. There were service corridors that ran the length of the house behind the main rooms, allowing the servants to pass from end to end without ever entering the family's spaces. There were concealed doors set flush into the walls of the family's rooms, papered or paneled to match so as to be nearly invisible, through which the servants could enter and leave, appearing and disappearing as if through the very walls. There were whole hidden routes designed so that a servant could bring what was needed to any room, or clear it away, or tend its fire, by ways that kept them out of the family's sight until the moment of service and returned them to invisibility immediately after. The house was threaded with these hidden ways, a concealed network of servant circulation running through and behind the visible house, so that the labor could reach everywhere and be seen nowhere. Something almost uncanny lives in this, in the idea of a house threaded with hidden passages and concealed doors, through which a whole population moved unseen, appearing from the walls to serve and vanishing back into them. And it expressed, in the very structure of the house, the ideal we have met again and again, the ideal of service without visible servants, of labor that appeared as if by magic and left no trace of the laborer. The hidden passages made that ideal real, gave the servants their concealed ways to move by, kept them out of sight as they went about the work that the house depended on, so that the family might live in their fine rooms, served by an invisible army that moved through hidden corridors and appeared through concealed doors and vanished again into the walls, present everywhere in their labor and nowhere in their persons, the ghosts in the machine of the house. We have spoken of the hidden passages of the house as the servants used them, but the idea of the hidden space in the house has a longer history than the Victorian age, and it is worth a moment, for the wealthy house of the 1880s sometimes stood on older foundations, and the older houses of England held hidden spaces of a very different and more dramatic kind. For the great houses of earlier centuries had sometimes been built with genuinely secret rooms, hidden chambers concealed within the walls and the floors, made for the hiding of people and things in dangerous times. The most famous of these were the priest holes, the secret hiding places built into the houses of Catholic families in the centuries when to practice the old religion was to risk death. Concealed chambers where a priest could be hidden at a moment's notice when the searchers came, cunningly built into the fabric of the house, behind paneling, under floors, within the thickness of walls and chimneys, so well concealed that some, it is said, were never found and may lie hidden still. These were hidden rooms in the fullest and most dramatic sense, secret chambers made to save lives, concealed with real ingenuity within the structure of the house. Other hidden spaces filled the old houses too, the sealed rooms and the forgotten chambers that accumulate in any building that stands for centuries, the spaces walled up and forgotten, the rooms closed off and lost, the concealed places that a very old house acquires over its long life. A house that had stood for 300 or 400 years, altered and rebuilt and added to by generation after generation, might hold within it all sorts of hidden and forgotten spaces, the traces of its older forms, walled up behind the newer work, concealed and lost within the fabric of the house. By the 1880s, of course, the making of such genuinely secret rooms was long past, for the dangerous times that had required them were over, and the hidden spaces of the Victorian house were of the domestic and practical kind we have explored, the servants' passages and the storage rooms, rather than the priest holes and the secret chambers. But the older houses still held their older secrets, and a Victorian family living in an ancient house might have, somewhere within its walls, a genuine hidden chamber from the dangerous past, a priest hole or a sealed room, a real secret space surviving from the older world into the comfortable Victorian present. And even in the newer houses, the idea of the hidden room, the secret space within the walls, retained its hold on the imagination, the sense that a house might contain concealed and secret places, that behind its walls and beneath its floors there might be more than met the eye, a sense that the Victorian house, with its servants' passages and its concealed doors and its many hidden rooms, did much to encourage. Let us stand still a moment, somewhere in the middle of the house, and simply take in how different its regions felt, for the Victorian house was not one place but many, and to move through it was to pass through a series of distinct worlds, each with its own light and its own air and its own whole atmosphere, and the contrasts between them were part of the very meaning of the house. Begin with the family's rooms, the fine front rooms, and the comfortable bedrooms, and feel their particular quality. They were warm, for they had their fires, kept burning through the day by the servants' constant labor. They were richly furnished, crowded with the furniture and the objects and the ornament that the age loved, layered and comfortable and full. They were well lit by the good windows that faced the light, and by the lamps and candles of the evening, and they were quiet, insulated by the green baize door and the thickness of the house from the labor that went on beyond them. A quiet, warm, rich world of comfort, the world the whole house existed to produce. To be in the family's rooms was to be at the heart of the Victorian ideal of home, the warm, bright, comfortable refuge against the hard world outside. Now cross the green baize door and feel the change. The servants' world was cooler, plainer, harder. The passages were narrow and dim. The working rooms were hot with labor or cold with stone, plain and functional, without ornament or comfort. The air carried the smells of the work, the cooking, and the coal and the washing. The sounds were the sounds of labor, the clatter and the scrubbing and the constant movement. It was a world of work, plain and hard and busy, entirely different in its whole feeling from the warm, rich comfort of the family's rooms a wall away. And to pass from one to the other through the green baize door was to cross between two atmospheres as different as two countries, the warm, rich quiet of the served world and the plain, hard, busy world of the serving, coexisting under one roof, divided by a single covered door. And then descend to the basement and feel the change again, for the basement had its own atmosphere, cool and dim and underground, lit by the small high windows, busy with the constant work of the kitchen and the offices, the whole underground world humming with the labor that ran the house. And climb to the attic and feel that too, the plain cold rooms under the roof where the servants slept, hot in summer and cold in winter, mean and bare. The house was a vertical journey through distinct worlds, the fine family floors in the middle, the working basement below, the servants' attic above, each with its own light and air and feeling, each a different world. And to travel through the house from top to bottom was to pass through the whole social range of the age rendered in rooms, from the mean attic to the fine drawing room to the hot kitchen, the whole ordered world of Victorian society laid out in the floors of a single house. We passed quickly on the family's floor that deserves a fuller visit, for it was one of the most used rooms in the daily life of the house, and yet one that a formal visitor might never see, and that is the morning room, and with it the whole question of how the family actually used its rooms through the day. The morning room was a family sitting room, less formal than the drawing room, used in the earlier part of the day, and it was where the family, and particularly the lady of the house, spent the working hours of the morning. Here the lady might deal with the household business, the ordering and the accounts and the correspondence, in a room comfortable and pleasant, but not kept for show as the drawing room was. Here the family might gather informally, read, sit, occupy themselves, in the private ease of a room that was theirs to use, rather than to display. The morning room was the everyday sitting room of the family, the room of ordinary daily life, as distinct from the drawing room, which was kept finer and used for the reception of guests and the more formal occasions. And this distinction between the rooms of everyday use and the rooms kept for show ran through the whole house and shaped how the family lived in it. The drawing room, the finest room, was in many households used relatively little, kept in its perfection for callers and occasions, while the family conducted its actual daily life in the less formal rooms, the morning room and the private rooms. There was something almost museum-like in the grand drawing room of a Victorian house, a room maintained in its finery, dusted and arranged and kept ready, but not truly lived in, reserved for the performances of hospitality rather than the ordinary business of life. The family lived, really, in its other rooms, its private and everyday rooms, and kept the grand room for show, so that the finest room in the house was often the least used, a stage set for the reception of guests rather than a room of daily life. This tells us something about the whole nature of the Victorian house, which was, in large part, a machine for display, a house arranged to present a certain face to the world, with its finest spaces kept for that presentation rather than for use. The showrooms were showrooms, maintained for the impression they made, while the real life of the family went on in the less formal spaces behind and around them. And this doubling, the showrooms and the used rooms, the face and the life, ran all through the house, part of the same great scheme of appearances that shaped the whole of Victorian existence, the careful presentation of a proper front, while the real life went on behind it. The morning room, where the family actually lived its days, was as much a hidden room, in its way, as any below stairs, hidden not by the servants' divide, but by the simple fact that it was not for show, not part of the face the house presented, but part of the private daily life that went on behind that face, unseen by the visitors who saw only the grand rooms kept ready for them. Let us find one more of the family's rooms before we turn toward the end, a room that was a particular pride of the Victorian house, and that belonged to the family's world of display and leisure, and that is the conservatory, the glass room where the plants grew. The conservatory was a room of glass, built onto the house, or opening off one of the main rooms, a structure of iron and glass that let in the light and held the warmth and made a growing place for plants within the house. It was one of the great enthusiasms of the Victorian age, this bringing of the garden indoors, this creation of a green and growing room where exotic plants and ferns and flowers could be cultivated and displayed, and a good conservatory was a mark of a house of taste and means. Here the family might sit among the greenery, in the light that came through the glass, in a room that was half indoors and half garden, warm and green and pleasant, filled with the plants that the age loved to grow and to show. The conservatory answered to a deep Victorian love of plants and of the display of them, for the age was passionate about its ferns and its flowers, its exotic specimens brought from around the world, its palms and its orchids, and its whole horticulture of the fashionable plant. And the conservatory was where this passion found its fullest domestic expression, a whole room given over to the growing and the showing of plants, a green paradise within the house, the family's own indoor garden, warm and bright and living, one of the pleasantest of all the rooms of the wealthy house. And it too, of course, rested on hidden labor, for the plants of the conservatory did not tend themselves, and behind the green display lay the constant work of the gardener and his under-gardeners, the watering and the tending and the raising of the plants, the maintaining of the heat that the exotic specimens required, the constant care that kept the conservatory green and flourishing. The gardeners worked, largely unseen, in the greenhouses and the potting sheds and the kitchen garden beyond the house, raising the plants that filled the conservatory and the flowers that decorated the rooms and the fruit and vegetables that fed the family. A whole department of outdoor labor supporting the house, as hidden in its way as the labor within, the green beauty of the conservatory being one more comfort produced by hands the family rarely saw. We have spoken often of the fires, the many fires that warmed the many rooms, and they deserve a section of their own, for the heating of the house was one of its great hidden systems, an enormous and constant labor that ran beneath the whole comfortable life of the family, and it shaped the house in ways worth understanding. The Victorian house was heated by open fires, one in each room that was used, burning in the grate, and there were a great many of them. Every room the family occupied had its fire, the drawing room and the dining room and the morning room and the bedrooms and the study and the rest, each with its grate and its fire, burning through the cold months to keep the room warm. And every one of these fires had to be tended, and the tending of them was a vast and constant labor that fell entirely on the servants. Each fire had to be laid, the grate cleaned of yesterday's ashes and set with fresh coal and kindling. Each had to be lit in the morning before the family rose, so that the rooms should be warm when the family entered them. Each had to be fed through the day, fresh coal brought and added to keep it burning, and each produced its ash and its dirt, which had to be cleaned away. Multiply this by the many fires of the house, and consider the labor involved. The cleaning and laying and lighting of a dozen fires or more every morning before the family woke. The carrying of the coal to feed them, from the cellar in the basement up to the rooms on every floor, the endless hauling of the heavy dirty fuel up the back stairs, the constant tending through the day, the feeding of the fires, and the clearing of the ash, the whole enormous business of keeping the house warm, fire by fire, room by room, day after day through the cold months, was one of the largest single labors of the household, and it fell on the housemaids, whose black-handed work of coal and ash and grate went on constantly, invisibly, beneath the warm comfort it produced. And the fires shaped the very rhythm of the servants' day, for the lighting of them was the first great task of the morning, the labor that had to be done before the family stirred, and so the servants rose in the cold and the dark, before dawn, to clean and lay and light the fires, so that the house should be warm when the family came down. The housemaid's day began with the fires, in the cold early dark, cleaning the grates and carrying the coal, and kindling the flames, room by room through the waking house, so that warmth should greet the family, and the labor that made it remain unseen. The fires were the house's warmth and the servants' burden, the comfort of the family and the constant labor of the staff, and they burned through the whole life of the house, a hidden system of heat and toil beneath the family's ease, tended by hidden hands in the cold hours before the family woke to the warmth they had made. Let us return to the family's bedroom floor and find a room we mentioned only in passing, the dressing room, for it was one of the more particular of the private rooms, and it opens onto the intimate daily business of the wealthy body and the servants who tended it. The dressing room we have seen was the small room adjoining the principal bedroom, where the business of dressing was done and the clothes were kept. But it was more than a mere closet, for the dressing of a wealthy Victorian lady or gentleman was an elaborate business requiring space and equipment and, often, assistance, and the dressing room was where it happened. Here were the wardrobes and the drawers that held the clothes, the great quantity of garments that a wealthy person owned. Here was the dressing table with its mirror, where the toilette was performed. Here the washstand, in a house without a proper bathroom. And here the lady was dressed by her maid, or the gentleman by his valet, in the daily ritual of assembling the clothed and presentable person from the array of garments and the labor of the personal servant. The lady's maid and the valet, the personal servants who worked in the dressing rooms, were a particular kind of servant, the most intimate of all, for their work brought them into the closest contact with the family, with their bodies and their clothes and their persons. The lady's maid dressed her mistress, arranged her hair, cared for her clothes, attended to her person in the most intimate ways, and spent her days in the private rooms, the bedroom and the dressing room and the boudoir, closer to her mistress than any other servant. This intimacy gave the personal servants a particular position, closer to the family than the other servants, privy to the private life of the rooms they worked in, trusted with the intimate business of the body and the wardrobe, and it made them, in a sense, the most hidden of all the servants, for they worked in the most private rooms, at the most private tasks, in the innermost hidden regions of the house. And the dressing room, where this intimate labor happened, was thus one of the most private of the private rooms, deep in the family's own territory, where the personal servant tended the family's body and clothes away from all other eyes. It held the family's clothes and the family's most intimate daily business, the assembling of the presentable person that the world would see, done here in private, in the dressing room, by the personal servant, before the finished person emerged to be seen. The dressing room was where the private became public, where the unclothed body was made into the clothed and presentable person, the hidden room where the daily transformation happened that the world took for granted, the person appearing dressed and correct, with all the labor and the intimacy of the dressing hidden behind in the private room where it was done. The house changed through the year in a way that is worth finding before we end our walk, for the house was not the same in every season, and the great houses in particular had a rhythm of emptying and filling that transformed them, and it reveals one more of the hidden lives of the rooms we have visited. For the wealthy family did not stay in one house all the year. The family with a townhouse and a country house, or with the means to travel, moved between them with the seasons, spending part of the year in town for the social season, and part in the country, and part perhaps away altogether, at the seaside or abroad or visiting. And when the family left a house, the house did not simply wait empty and unchanged. It was, in a real sense, put to sleep. The furniture was covered over with loose covers of holland or plain cloth, the dust sheets that turned the rooms into a landscape of shrouded shapes. The valuables were put away. The blinds were drawn and the shutters closed, and the rooms left in a dim covered stillness. And most of the servants went too, or were reduced to a skeleton few left to mind the sleeping house, so that the great house, so full of life and labor when the family was in residence, sank into a shrouded quiet, its rooms dim and covered and still, waiting for the family to return. Something haunting lives in the image of the great house asleep, its rooms full of furniture shrouded in white covers, dim behind drawn blinds, silent and waiting, the whole busy life of it suspended, the fires cold in the grates, the servants gone, the family away. The house that we have walked through so full of life and labor, the family in its rooms, and the servants at their work, and the whole busy machine of it running, becomes, when the family goes, a still and shrouded and sleeping place, its rooms like a museum after closing, its life suspended until the season turns and the family returns to wake it. And then it all comes back, the covers off and the blinds up and the fires lit and the servants at their work and the family in its rooms, the sleeping house waking again to its full busy life, until the next departure sends it back to sleep. And this rhythm, this waking and sleeping of the house with the seasons, was one more of the hidden lives of the rooms, the life they had when the family was away, the shrouded stillness behind the drawn blinds, the covered furniture in the dim rooms, the skeleton staff, moving quietly through the sleeping house. The rooms we have visited had this other existence too, this seasonal sleep, when they stood empty and covered and still, and it was as much a part of their life as the busy occupied hours, the great house breathing in and out with the seasons, full and empty, waking and sleeping, alive with the family's presence, and shrouded in its absence through the turning year. So that was the Victorian house, from the front door to the hidden passages, from the boudoir to the scullery, from the attic where the servants slept to the cellar where the coal was kept. And I hope, having walked through the whole of it, you can see now how much more it held than the grand front rooms that were all a visitor ever saw. It was a house of hidden rooms, and we have found them, room by room. The private retreats of the family, the boudoir and the study, where the mistress and the master withdrew from the world and even from each other. The children's kingdom at the top, the nursery and the schoolroom, where the young of the family lived apart in the care of servants. The servants' world, above and below, the mean attic bedrooms and the busy working basement, the kitchen and the scullery and the servants' hall, the whole hidden domain where the labor that ran the house was done. The concealed spaces, the box rooms and the linen rooms and the hidden passages threaded through the house, behind and beneath the rooms that were meant to be seen. A whole hidden house, behind the public face, where the real and private and laborious life of the household went on, out of the visitor's sight. And running through all of it, we have found the one great principle that shaped every room and every passage and every stair. The principle of separation, the keeping apart that was the whole philosophy of the house. Family from servant, male from female, adult from child, public from private, clean from dirty, seen from unseen. The house was a machine for keeping people apart, for maintaining the divisions that the age held sacred, and its hidden rooms were hidden because the whole design was built to hide them, to keep certain lives and certain labors out of sight, to present a proper face while the real and various life of the household went on behind it, divided and separated and concealed in the many rooms that the house so carefully kept apart. Let us be fair, at the last, to the people who lived in all these rooms, for the house was not only a machine of division, but a home, and real lives were lived in it, with all their pleasure and their labor and their meaning. The family in its comfortable rooms lived a life of real warmth and real ease, and there was nothing false in the comfort of the fire and the pleasure of the private retreat and the security of the well-ordered home. And the servants in their hidden world lived real lives too, hard lives, but not only hard, for there was fellowship in the servants' hall, and pride in work well done, and a whole community below stairs, with its own richness and its own warmth. The house held all of these lives, the served and the serving, the family and the servants, each in their rooms, each in their world, and the lives were real, all of them, whatever we may think of the divisions that shaped them. But the divisions were real too, and the labor was real, and the great comfortable life of the family in its fine rooms rested, at every point, on the hidden labor of the servants in theirs, and on the great gulf between the many rooms of the wealthy house and the single room where the poor family lived. The warm, bright rooms above were warmed by the black-handed labor below. The effortless comfort of the family was the constant effort of the staff, and the whole beautiful house, with its fine rooms and its careful separations, was built to keep all of that out of sight, to let the comfort appear as if it made itself, to hide the labor and the laborers, in the concealed rooms and the hidden passages, so that the family might live in ease and never see the work that made the ease possible. That was the Victorian house, and that was its secret, the hidden rooms and the hidden labor behind the grand front, the whole concealed world beneath the polished face. So picture it one last time as we let it go, the house at night, all its rooms dark and quiet, the family asleep in their fine bedrooms, the servants asleep in their attic under the roof, the kitchen cold and still in the basement, the fires burned down to ash in all the many grates, the great house with all its rooms, the seen and the hidden, the fine and the mean, the families and the servants, all dark now, all quiet, all sleeping together under the single roof that held them so carefully apart. The hidden rooms are hidden now in the greater dark, the boudoir and the scullery, the nursery and the coal cellar, all one in the sleeping house, all quiet, all still. And the house stands, in the night, holding all its lives and all its rooms and all its secrets, the whole hidden world of it at rest, until the morning comes, and the servants rise in the cold dark to light the fires, and the great machine of the house begins again. Sleep well.